Thank you, Madam Speaker. I do appreciate the opportunity that the Leader of the Opposition has given us to actually talk about, more generally, the points that he has been making. This is a very broad motion. I remind the Leader of the Opposition that at no point during his rambling speech did the government take the general point of order that he wasn't talking to the suspension of standing orders. So I do intend, Madam Speaker, to use this as an opportunity to outline to the House and to the Australian people the realities of the political situation that we found ourselves in 12 months ago. 12 months ago, after 2007 to 2013, one of the most rotten governments in Australian history was cut down by the Australian people in a landslide defeat. It wasn't a fluke. It didn't just happen. They didn't just fall out of office. It wasn't by 1 or 2 seats or 0.5%. They were beaten and beaten badly because they had 6 years of the most grotesque chaos and dysfunction that the Australian public have ever had to tolerate. Let's go through it. They had a Prime Minister in Kevin Rudd. They went to bed one night with Kevin Rudd as the Prime Minister. They woke up the next morning, Julia Gillard was the Prime Minister. They went to bed one night with Julia Gillard as Prime Minister. The next morning they woke up, Kevin Rudd was Prime Minister again. In a 6-year period, they managed to knife 2 Prime Ministers in the back, led by the Leader of the Opposition, Bill the Knife. And in fact, he was exposed by Paul Kelly in his excellent book, where Paul Kelly wrote, "The Gillard camp was contemptuous of Shorten, considering him weak and duplicitous." Weak and duplicitous, Madam Speaker, and the Australian public know that for all the huffing and puffing, all the confected outrage from the Leader of the Opposition, he has not at any point said that he would put any of the money back that he claims has been taken from any of the areas of government spending, whether it's efficiency dividends, whether it's a reduction in the increase in spending. He hasn't said he will put any of that money back or return things to the state they were in 2013 because he knows, Madam Speaker, that he can't. And at the next election, in 2016, the Australian public will be faced with the prospect of electing a weak and duplicitous Leader of the Opposition who couldn't stay loyal to one Prime Minister, let alone 2 Prime Ministers, because he was so ambitious, so ruthless, so relentless in his pursuit of power that he stabbed 2 Prime Ministers in the back, not even just one, Madam Speaker. We had, during those 6 years, we had Harry Jenkins stabbed in the back and replaced by Peter Slipper as the Speaker. We had Craig Thomson defended and supported by this Leader of the Opposition and by Julia Gillard throughout the tawdry period when we were trying to bring Craig Thomson into this House to explain himself. We had, Madam Speaker, the Pink Bats disaster. We had cash for clunkers. We had $16.5 billion wasted on school halls throughout Australia. We had the live cattle exports disaster. Based on one television program on 4 corners, the Labor Party thought it was good public policy to destroy the live cattle exports industry in Australia, putting 1,000 Indigenous workers out of their jobs, destroying livelihoods, destroying farms, breaking people all across northern Australia. They thought that was good government policy. And this particular Shadow Minister here, he was the one that brought the great super trawler to Australia. And then when the heat came on, he stopped the super trawler from coming into Australia. He was one of the most dangerous vandals to ever hold office in the Cabinet of Australia. But the list goes on, Madam Speaker. When we took over in 2013, thanks to the Australian public, we were faced with $123 billion of deficits as far as the eye could see. If we'd done nothing at all, our debt would have risen to $667 billion, Madam Speaker. $123 billion of deficits, $667 billion of debt. That is the legacy that Labor left us. And it's even worse, Madam Speaker. It was this Leader of the Opposition that brought the CFMEU back into the Cabinet room and gave them a seat at the Cabinet table. And as the Minister for Industrial Relations, structured industrial relations in this country so that the CFMEU would be able to bring their thuggery and their standover tactics and their outright criminality to building and construction sites throughout the country once again. having been forced off them by the Australian Building and Construction Commission set up by the current Prime Minister many years ago. The list is endless, Madam Speaker. They misled Australians on a grand scale. Who can forget the current member for Lilly standing up and announcing the 3 years of surpluses that I deliver tonight, knowing that they were never going to deliver a surplus, having not delivered one since 1989, Madam Speaker, since 1989. This is the chaos and dysfunction that greeted us when we took over the Treasury benches in 2013. They mugged the mining industry with the mining tax. They mugged export-exposed industries through the carbon tax. They cost households at least $550 a year in their electricity bills. They shut down small businesses reliant on electricity and gas because of the carbon tax, Madam Speaker. They did all these things, and not unnaturally, the Australian people decided to hand over the reins of power to the current government. Now, what did we say, Madam Speaker? Our commitment was this, and I quote the current Prime Minister, our commitment. This is what a Liberal and National Party government will do. We'll build a stronger economy so everyone can get ahead. Free trade agreements with Korea, with China, with Japan, a growing economy, 109,000 new jobs at least created by this government. We'll scrap the carbon tax so your family will be $550 a year better off. Done, Madam Speaker. Carbon tax abolished. Labor wants to bring it back. We'll get the budget back under control by ending Labor's waste, and that's what we are doing, Madam Speaker, right across government. And no agency, no authority, no department should be immune from trying to be less wasteful and spend taxpayers' money as well as they possibly can. Because the government's money is not sitting in the Treasury somewhere belonging to the government. It belongs to the Australian people, Madam Speaker, and we should never waste $1, let alone never applying an efficiency dividend to an authority that has a $6.9 billion budget over the next 5 years, applying a dividend to that for 20 years. The ABC had no efficiency dividend for 20 years. We'll stop the boats. Tick, Madam Speaker. We've certainly stopped the boats. This shadow minister again said it couldn't be done. The left said it's not possible. It is impossible to stop the boats. What's happened? In the last 12 months, while the Minister of Immigration's been at the helm, the boats have stopped. The children are getting out of detention. We are closing detention centres, whether it's at Curtin, whether it's at Inverbrackie, and the Australian public are not stupid, Madam Speaker. They see all these things. They certainly listen to the static that goes on in this place and elsewhere. But they know in their heart of hearts that the government is delivering on their promises. And we also said, the Prime Minister said, and we'll build the roads of the 21st century. And that is exactly what we have done, Madam Speaker. We've started the process, having picked up the broken infrastructure portfolio from the current member for Grayndler. We're getting things done. They were good at announcing things, Madam Speaker. They were good at photo opportunities, although it didn't save them. But actually, the current Minister for Transport and Infrastructure is getting the work done to make sure that there are bulldozers moving, that there are sods being turned on roads infrastructure, whether it's the North-South corridor in South Australia, whether it's the East-West link in Victoria. This government knows that we have to get things done to create jobs and to create growth. Because the fundamental difference between us and Labor, Madam Speaker, and the Greens is that we don't just play politics every day. What we do as cabinet ministers and as members of this government is every day we think, how will we get more jobs flowing into our electorates? How do we get more growth in the economy? How do we repair the damage done by Labor so that business can create jobs? That's what we do, Madam Speaker. On this side of the House, we did it. We did it in the Menzies era, we did it in the Fraser era, we did it in the Howard era, and we'll do it again in the Abbott era. All Labor does is think every day, how can we play politics? How can we play politics with people's lives? How can we play politics with household budgets? How can we play politics with big developments like the Olympic Dam in South Australia? How can we give the unions more power and control so they keep voting for us in pre-selection? The fundamental difference between this side of the House and the opposition is we care about the Australian public and they care about the Australian Labor Party, Madam Speaker. So we will keep doing what we're doing. We will keep governing for the best, for the betterment of Australia, and I'm absolutely confident that at the next election the Australian public will support us.